Voodoo priestesses, haunted cemeteries, and amazing beignets. These are just a few of the things that the beautiful and historic city of New Orleans has to offer, but there's so much more beneath the surface. Hi! Welcome to Most Amazing. I'm Connor, and today I'm counting down the top 10 most terrifying places in New Orleans. Let's get into it. And if you're from New Orleans, leave me a comment and let me know if there's anywhere that I missed. Number 10, Café du Monde. Café du Monde is probably one of the most well-known places on this list, mostly for having what many people say are the best beignets in town. But there can be a problem with the service. No, not from the employees, I'm sure that they're amazing, but apparently some people give their order to a waiter only to never have it arrive, or see the waiter again. Since the restaurant is open 24 hours a day, some customers have seen some freaky things at night, including a ghost waiter who has been haunting the place for decades. No one knows who they might have been, but they must have loved their job a whole lot if they keep coming back to work after they've passed on. Or maybe they worked themselves to death and can't escape the horrors of the night shift. As someone with a lot of restaurant experience, I feel bad for not only the ghostly server, but for the folks who never got their orders. Number 9, the Old French Opera House. Before we move on to number 9, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing videos. While it no longer stands today, and many bars and businesses take up the space where it once was, the witch of the Opera House still lurks in the area of her final resting place. Her story begins in the 1860s. Her name was Marguerite, and she made quite a splash during her debut, but not because she was a good singer. Apparently she wasn't. But it was because of her beauty. After a while, people began to see through her, and they realized that beauty wasn't enough to carry a show, and her career dried up. Financially ruined after losing her career and husband due to a sudden accident, Marguerite decided to fall back and open a bakery. But there was a problem. She couldn't bake. So she sent for the best Parisian pastry chef that she could find, and he came to work for her. And he was pretty easy on the eyes. They fell for each other and they were happy for years. Then one day she heard that her new husband was cheating on her and had a second apartment that they used as a love nest. Enraged, she went to the apartment in the middle of the night, turned on the gas in the fireplace, and left with the gas leaking out. The chef and the mistress suffocated, and Marguerite broke into the opera house and hung herself from the chandelier in her old costume, which she'd stolen from the production. They say that you can still hear her and see her screaming for her lost love in the street where the opera house once stood. Number 8, the Old Absinthe House. It was originally built in 1752, but burned down in the Great Friday Fire of 1788. When it was rebuilt, it became a place for people to meet and discuss less than savory topics, and have some absinthe, a very strong alcohol that was said to have hallucinogenic properties. While many people gathered for drinks here, there was one meeting that took place that was instrumental in American history. According to the legend, in 1815, General Andrew Jackson called for a meeting with someone you wouldn't expect, a notorious pirate by the name of Jean Lafitte. Now, why was a general meeting with a pirate? Well, he needed help with the impending battle with the British for the city, and he knew that Jean knew the city and its surrounding swamps and waters like the back of his hand. In exchange for full pardons, Jackson had Jean's army of pirates released from jail so that they could assist with the war, and they actually helped him turn the tide of what became known as the Battle for New Orleans. Lafitte can still be seen at his favorite spot in the bar on the second floor, wearing his hat and indulging himself with food and drink. Others have spotted the ghosts of Andrew Jackson, as well as Marie Laveu and Madame LaLaurie, both of whom we'll talk about in a little while. With all of these spirits around and reports of slamming doors, footsteps, and flying bottles, I'd stay away from here. In our number 7 spot, we have the Faulkner House. William Faulkner was a Nobel Prize winning author who wrote many amazing works, including The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying. Faulkner moved to this house on Pirates Alley in the 1920s, and it's actually where he wrote his first novel, A Soldier's Pay. The house was bought by a couple in 1990 and turned into a bookstore, but apparently Faulkner never left. Visitors report the smell of pipe smoke, which the author was smoking constantly, while the new owners were not, as well as books falling off the shelves, usually books written by him. I feel like buying a haunted book is just a recipe for trouble, even if it's a classic. Number 6, Le Petit Theatre. Established in 1916, this theater has been the host to many plays and performers over the years, but one has become more infamous famous than the rest. In 1930s, many plays were coming through, touring the South, and one of them was led by a performer called Caroline. Her last name has been lost to time. Right before a performance, she decided to go for a walk outside on the theater's balcony and tragically fell over the rail and lost her life. Now, visitors of the theater who go stand in the spot she fell from report a sudden drop in temperature and feel a pull towards the edge. Some people also say that they've seen Caroline's reflection in the water of the theater's fountain, still in costume, ready to go on stage. What is it with NOLA and haunted theaters? Number 5. Sultans Palace. In 1839, Jean-Baptiste Lepret purchased a lavish half-story mansion from a struggling dentist as a new home for his brother, who just so happened to be a sultan from a far-off land. When the sultan arrived by ship, he brought with him a harem of wives, eunuchs, and all sorts of lavish furniture, all of which paraded through the street on their way to the house. Townspeople who lived nearby heard all-night parties and the smell of smoke emanating from within the palace, and were put off that they were never invited. But one day a man was walking by and he saw something shocking: blood dripping down the front steps and forming a pool in the street. The man fled to a police station to tell them about what he'd found, and when the police arrived, they saw quite a grisly scene. Bodies were lying all over the floor, some with missing limbs, some cut open and broken as though some sort of beast had torn them apart. But the most disturbing find was in the courtyard, where through the wet soil a hand was reaching up, but not moving, as if whoever belonged to it was asking for help after being buried alive. When they dug him up, they recognized him as the Sultan himself. The case was never solved, but it was believed to be the brother's doing that caused the horrors, as his body was never found, and he had the most to gain from the Sultan's death. Number 4. Pharmacy Museum. Now, I know a pharmacy museum doesn't sound that exciting, but stay with me here. In 1823, Louis de Filot, the nation's first licensed pharmacist, opened a pharmacy where the museum now stands, and ran it successfully for years. But in 1855, he sold it to Dr. Joseph Dupas, who lived there until he died of syphilis in 1867. But it seems that he got what he deserved. Dr. Dupas allegedly was performing shocking experiments on pregnant slaves, as well as other horrible things like poisoning with what he told people was medicine. It is said that his spirit is doomed to haunt the museum, where some of the remnants of his grotesque experiments still remain, and visitors have reported seeing him in a brown suit, throwing books, and even pushing people to the ground. He seems like a vengeful spirit, so stay away from here. Number 3. Marie Laveu's house. Marie Laveu is perhaps one of the most well-known and allegedly most powerful voodoo practitioners of all time. Born in 1794, she was the student and successor of Dr. John, a voodoo priest who was supposedly an African prince from Senegal. She would often conduct business in Congo Square, earning the favor of slaves by giving them charms, cures, and even spells in return for information on their masters. She used this information when the masters requested her services to impress them in a simpler way before showing her true power and conducting rituals. The house where she lived was also said to be a meeting place for people, where they performed chants and rituals late into the night. The house was torn down in 1903, but a new structure, which is now a vacation rental, was built on the same foundations, and some say that that's how her spirit still remains in the house. One couple recounted the story of their stay, where late one night they heard chanting and drumming. They checked outside, but there was no one there. When they realized the sounds were coming from the empty living room, they decided to not sleep there that night. Good call. When they returned the next morning, there was a single pristine feather lying in the middle of the living room, but all of the doors and the windows were locked tight. They checked out immediately and never returned, because to a voodoo practitioner, a feather is good luck, but to an unsuspecting person, it is an omen of death or a hex having been placed upon you. So stay away from here if you don't wish to be cursed. Number 2. St. Louis Cemetery. Number 1. Established in 1789, this cemetery is New Orleans' oldest extant gravesite and is also considered one of the most haunted cemeteries in the US. With over 700 tombs and over 100,000 dead buried here, it makes sense that there would be some spirits that hung around. While most ghosts are said to haunt the places that they died, and not their graves, something about this place draws them in, and there are some very famous ones who reside here. Allegedly, our good friend Marie Laveu is seen here more often than anywhere else, though some claim that she still lives after creating an immortality potion, and she comes here, where her tomb also resides, to communicate with the dead, only to be mistaken for a spirit. It's said that if you place 3 X's on her tomb, your wish will be granted, and if it is, you must return and place a gift, or you will face the consequences. Some people report falling ill here, sudden bruises or cuts appearing, and hearing voices. Other spirits of the cemetery include that of a sailor whose family tomb was sold out from under him while on the high seas, and he's looking for somewhere to rest his soul. And finally, we reach number 1, the house of Madame Delphine LaLaurie. Delphine was a wealthy woman of high stature who married into even more riches and a grand house. She was also played by Kathy Bates in season 3 of American Horror Story. Her and her husband were often heard screaming and arguing all the way from the street, and he eventually left her after finding out some of her dark secrets. LaLaurie was a monstrous woman who performed terrible experiments on slaves that worked in her house, and her world came crashing down when a fire started in her home. When men arrived to put the fire out, they found many horrors in the attic. They found 7 slaves who were suspended by the neck and stretched and bent into horrible positions which they were bound into. Some had pieces of skin flayed off or missing limbs, and one woman had apparently had her bones broken such that she could be fit into a box. Delphine fled the city that night and never returned, but it's said that the ghosts of those who were mutilated there haunt the house looking for their revenge. A man who lived there in the 1900s heard the voices telling him to do horrible things, and eventually he took his own life, proving that the spirits want no one to enter the house where such atrocities happened. That's all I have for you today. I'm Connor, stay amazing, and I'll see you next time.